Welcome back to Ambivalent Offenders. This is Jamie.
And this is Erin.
And we are still in October.
Woo!
So what that means is we are still doing our Patreon special. So come on and join us over there. As I said previously, it is free to join and you would stay a free member. Again, there's no gotcha at the end of the month. Although if you want to continue getting content, you can join at the $3 or $5 a month Patreon level.
Mm-hmm.
We are recording this 2 days after our birthday, so it'll be a little birthday gift of joining our Patreon, even as a free member. As we said, right now, everything is unlocked, so you can check it out. And then for other things, don't really think we have too much to add besides, again, to review or like or rate our podcast. We always appreciate the support. It's nice to see or share with a friend. All of that is so nice to hear. I got to hear some nice words about the podcast today from a coworker. Shout out to Mark. It was very, very nice to hear.
Yeah, always good. It's good to hear from strangers and people we know alike.
He liked the Rupert story. Before we head into today's episode, we do have another, a same, but a new, we have a trailer swap, essentially. We've heard this one before if you are a loyal listener, but we always like to support other history podcasts in our community, especially female-run ones. So wanted to shout that out, and that will be at the end. Erin, do you want to add anything else?
No, right now, Doorkey, which is a podcast that we will be doing the trailer for, they have a spooktacular. So if you want macabre subjects, I know they just did one on Jamestown and the cannibalism that occurred there. If you like spooky things, I would check them out.
Awesome. So we will jump right into That's might be a record for our shortest.
I know, we're so brief.
It's not what we're known for, our brevity.
Well, the rest of this won't be very brief.
Okay. So, Erin, besides seeing your interesting and a little creepy Instagram reels I know nothing about, who we're doing today.
I was going to say, I'm pretty sure you probably haven't heard of Caterina Sforza. I wouldn't say she's little known, but where she comes at in history, she's often overshadowed by the men who she came into contact with, as they comprise some of Italy's most infamous dynasties. You've got the Medici and the Borgias. I knew a little bit about her from the Showtime series, The Borgias. She appears in that from the 2000s, led by my man crush, Jeremy Irons, as Pope Alexandra, a.k.a. the Borgia Pope. So if we want to talk about generous casting, oh boy, look up Pope Alexander VI and Jeremy Irons, and you will be surprised.
Not quite the same.
No. I guess she's also in Assassin's Creed, too, which I had no idea about that. But when I was doing research, I saw that came up. I did have a rough idea of Caterina, at least I thought I did in my mind going into it, but in researching her, there's obviously much more to the story, as there usually is, than you expect going in.
So she's associated with the Borgias.
Yes.
It's Caterina what?
Caterina Sforza. She's a Sforza. If you've been to Milan, the Sforzas are the ducal families, the Dukes of Milan for a while. There's a lot to commend her on. If you do know of her, you'll know that she's sort of this real warrior, female leader in the Italian Renaissance, this female powerhouse.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and after all, her nickname is the Tigress of Forli. But
I like that.
I know, but Caterina's legacy is marred by instances of violence that shocked even her contemporaries.
Whoa.
It's going to be a ride. The book that I read for this episode puts it nicely in the introduction by saying that, quote, some historians have dismissed her as a tyrant propelled by greed for power and insatiable sexual appetite, end quote.
Ooh.
Obviously, we'll address those accusations as we talk about Caterina's life. Like many figures of the past, she's fascinating in both the ways that she resembles us, particularly what she says about female rulership,
thought you were going to say female sexuality.
Well, that
and I was like,
too.
get it,
Girl,
girl.
a
Okay.
girl. And the ways in which he differs from our modern values and morals. So that's my little spiel at the top.
Insatiable
Sexual appetite.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
That's why the tigress part.
No, we won't get into the tigress part. We'll hear about the nickname in part 2. So if you're waiting for it in part 1, I'm sorry, you're going to have to wait for part 2. We just got to keep you coming back for more.
Can we also give her, as historians, can we say the nickname's also a little wink at sensation?
Yeah, we'll talk all about that, but there's a lot.
And I know this is a podcast, but so you couldn't see this, but I did do a really awkward Lucille wink.
Yeah, we love her for that, but there are some things that we will not love her for.
Okay.
And I think in this episode, you'll be ready to make her a patron saint of badass women, but before you put her as a patron saint, we'll just wait until episode 2, because I think this will be a pretty good introduction to her, but she will be doing a lot more in part 2.
I feel like lately I've been doing musicians with mommy issues, and you do
violin. Yeah, that's kind of our niche. That's each of our kinks. Before I start, I do want to say, in terms of sources, I read the Tigress of Forli, Renaissance Italy's most courageous and notorious countess, as part of this research, which is really good. It's a spectacular read. I think I devoured it in 2 days, if even that. So when I'm quoting things, it'll be from that book. I highly recommend that. It's very readable, not dry in the slightest, and also a trigger warning. There will be mentions of sexual assault and child marriage in this first part and part 2. So if that upsets you, proceed with caution. Okay, first, before we go into Caterina's story, we're going to place ourselves in the Italian states at this time in the 15th century, because at this time, Italy is not united. So that won't happen until much, much later, the 19th century. So we're in the 15th century, 1400s. Each of these Italian cities are states of their own. Florence has its own government and is controlled by the powerful Medici family, which I'm sure you've heard of.
Of course, yeah.
And then obviously Milan has their own government, Venice, etc.
So this, and at the same time as the Medicis as well.
Yeah, we'll be talking about, they will appear in this part. But yeah, each of them is sort of battling over pieces outside of those cities too. There's, villages, properties that are outside of that city too. So there's a lot of tension between these city-states. And it doesn't help that the Pope is, in fact, in Rome with his own power block and his own territories called the Papal States. So yes, the Pope had territories at this time. And if he's an Italian pope, he's got family to protect too. We'll get into that when we talk about specific popes here. But I just want you to imagine all the tension between each of these city-states is immense. And even inside the wall, there's a lot of violence. This is the world that Caterina was born into. Would have known.
Right. So definitely not a united Italy by any means.
No.
It's very much everyone wants more power, more land.
Yeah. And again, there's all these little tiny territories outside of each of these big cities that are for the taking. And that will be a big part of not only this episode, but going forward as part of Caterina's life.
So, and world history. Everybody fighting over land.
Yeah, especially in the Papal States and the Italian Peninsula is just rife with it until it gets united.
I don't want to go off topic too much, but I was doing a mini lesson for my teachers, actually, are going to take part in a lesson that I did with my 11th grade leaders for world history with hunting and gathering. But I'm not going to go too much into the lesson, but we're going to go through a mini version of that. But then it talks about the first agricultural revolution, Neolithic revolution, and a lot of people who have talked about the negative effects of farming. That's obviously one of their big pieces, is suddenly land becomes valuable because not everybody can have land.
Yeah.
And so that's suddenly to fight over it versus, hunting and gathering.
Oh, there's a lot of fight.
Yeah,
Especially
just some file side.
Yeah. Caterina was born in 1463. Her father, Galeazzo Sforza. Okay. Yes, guys.
I'm liking it.
I should have said off the top. One, I did go and look at the pronunciation for these Italian names. We are not Italian. We are Romanian, Polish. So the Italian name,
Pretty much any country that has been conquered in the 20th
if they're
century.
downtrodden, we're from them. But if you are Italian and listening to this, I'm sorry. I did my best. I tried to write these down, especially this one.
She did say she was worrying. She was worried. I will say, though, it was very sexy.
Her father, Galeazzo Sforza, was the Duke of Milan, which we already talked about is one of the many city-states in Italy. The Duke, I'm just going to call him the Duke because it sounds very Bridgerton.
I do.
But unlike Bridgerton Duke, he's not a nice guy. So that's where the Bridgerton comparisons stop.
Is he a bad guy, though, with a heart of gold?
No, there's no heart of gold.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I won't talk too much about him right now, but we'll talk a little bit why he's not a great guy.
Come on, Daddy Duke.
No heart of gold. Does he have a heart? I don't know. Jury's out. But Caterina's mother, Lucrezia, was his mistress, not his wife. So the Duke had married her off to a courtier who could do little against the Duke's advances on his wife, which not unusual for the time, unfortunately. And the Duke of Milan seems especially to have loved to sleep with other men's wives and daughters and basically anything that moved.
Okay, Daddy Duke, I don't like you.
That's far from his worst traits, but that is a bad trait.
Oh,
but normally being born to a mistress would be an inauspicious start to a child's life.
Yeah.
They'd be maybe shuttled off to a convent or raised in semi-privacy. Elsewhere, illegitimate kids of the nobility and royalty, they'd be maybe not hidden away, but they'd be raised far from the royal nursery, so not to be a constant reminder of the husband's infidelity to the royal wife.
That's not the that's not
no, in Italy things were different. So Caterina would be raised alongside the 4 legitimate children of the Duke.
I'm sure that the mom just
that.
I should say it. Not Caterina's mom, but I should say Daddy Duke's wife is probably.
I'm sure she was just like, yeah, another one. So come on in. We've got a routine for this at this point.
Right. There's procedures.
The households, they've written up procedures for it. But to quote the book, in Italy, bastard children were the norm, especially in the ruling house of Milan. Custom held that natural children would be raised in the house of the father, side by side with the rightful heirs. For Caterina, this custom would start her off really well in life. One of the largest cities in Europe, Milan was a place of culture, commerce, learning. It actually had one of the first printing presses in Europe, so yay.
Oh, wow. So did her mom not play any part in her life?
No,
then?
she was close to her mother, too. So her maternal family, she knew. It's not like she didn't know her mom, but she was raised with her father at that court because that was where everything was happening. And like I said, Milan's beautiful and full of culture, and the court of the Duke is no different. He especially has a really good eye for luxury clothes and fine things. So there's an occurrence when the Milanese court visited Florence. The Florentines were shocked at the gaudiness of the Duke and his entourage. Right. They're like, ooh. They're like, oh no, that was
some flamboyant Italian fashion.
Yeah, they were not having it. And that's actually when Caterina was along for the ride, and she met Lorenzo Medici, who is, we'll talk about later, that this should have been just a kid, but she'd always have a love for Florence and the Florentines, so side note. But Caterina, she'd also love luxury when she grew up, so she inherited that from dad.
There's worse things. Mm-hmm. If you have the money.
Mm-hmm.
Did she like the gaudiness of it all, or was she a little more?
Well, she knew how to wear clothes and stuff. We'll say that. Her education, though, is like as good as you could get. Again, she's raised in that same household as her half brothers and sisters, and there's no differentiation in terms of their education. So she's learning Latin, which is a must for the 15th century. She's reading classics. She's actually reading everything. The Duke of Milan had this amazing library. They said he had over 1,000 books, which would all be at Caterina's disposal.
Okay. So he's like the Beast and Beauty and the Beast.
I mean, pretty much, but with no redeemable qualities. Literal beast.
Yeah. He's just going to stay a beast.
And this really surprised me too, was at the time, there was less of a divide between how the girls and boys were taught at the court. So she was learning things like actual fighting. She knew how to fight, which would come in handy later. Yeah. Yeah, it is really unique education. You think of warrior women of the time, a little bit around the same time-ish as Isabella of Castile, who would go on campaign, but she left the fighting up to her husband, Ferdinand. But Caterina's at this really early age learning how to fight.
That's pretty crazy that it was as egalitarian as it sounds.
Here's a quote from the book. The Sforzas emphasized training the female children alongside the males in the use of weapons, riding, and chase. Her education developed both the intellect and fundamentals of military leadership. So, very well-rounded girl. She's a girl who loved books, hunting, riding, clothes. And eventually she'd be known for making her own medicine and alchemy and stuff too.
That's just pretty shocking, especially being at the heart of, I know we're not in Rome, but we're in Italy, so close still what we think of.
Doesn't Catholic
conservatism.
Yeah, conservatism. Yeah. No.
Right.
Yeah.
Very much, men do this, women do this. And like to train her in military leadership, I can't even think of another comparison in history where you would hear that. Even Queen Elizabeth.
Yeah, that's what the closest I could think of is Isabella of Castile, but she wasn't trained in that. She didn't fight. She was also very conservative, where she left that to her husband, Ferdinand. Right. There really isn't any equal. So, yeah, it seems like time, place meant that Caterina got all the education she'd need for the rest of her life.
Yeah.
During this time, she became really close to her stepmother. So this would be her dad's new wife, Bana of Savoy. She married the Duke of Milan in 1468. Caterina would have been about 5 years old.
Was this after a divorce or
no death? That was like he was married originally, and then he married Bana of Savoy. She loved the children and loved them like her own. And Caterina and Bana, they would continue to write to each other even after Caterina was married and left the family home. It's this very sweet relationship. It kind of reminds me of Princess Elizabeth, the future. Well, and Catherine Parr. Yeah, really not related by blood, but very close.
And of course, Daddy Duke never cheated after
of
that,
course.
Sure.
Unfortunately, childhood would be very brief for Caterina. Yes, we're having another child bride. And she gets married even younger than the other subject of our podcast, Isabella of France. So I talked about,
wasn't that 12? Oh, God. 9?
10. So she marries at the impossibly young age of 10 to the 30-year-old Girolamo.
What? Was this typical of, not royal, but pretty much like aristocracy?
I mean, it's hard. Children, unfortunately, if they're getting married young, it's always the upper class monarchy, the Phi alliances. So that's not too unusual. This one does deviate in the fact that Girolamo, the future husband or her husband, from what we could tell, he really wanted to consummate the marriage right away. I know, this is really deeply upsetting. If it helps that some sources say they waited until the proper age, which is around 14 years old, which is still young. But so the story goes that her future husband, he wanted to consummate it right away. So he's originally going to marry an 11-year-old cousin of Caterina's, but that It was
way older.
Well, that's cousin's parents did the right thing and said, no, she's not going to be consummating it right away. So Girolamo was ready to walk. So thank you, parents. They're the real heroes of the story. The bar is so low.
No, you can't marry and consummate the marriage of my 11-year-old
There was
daughter.
a tradition that usually it would be, so in these cases, they would be married, but instead of consummating, they would get into the bed with each other and kind of touch feet. And then that would be like the consummation. But Girolamo was not all about that. So that left room for somebody with way less morals. Daddy Duke. Yep. Caterina's father, who I mentioned had a bad reputation. He was more than happy to agree to the term. Girolamo Riario, her future husband, this man, he is the nephew of the Pope.
Oh.
This is why Caterina's father is like,
Yeah, makes
okay, I
sense,
want to align to the Pope. I hate all the men here. They all suck. And I will say that. And again, I do want to stress, if they really did consummate it at 10, this is not okay, even for the time. I know people always think medieval people, when they see these young marriages, like, for example, it would probably be almost about the same time. Contemporary would be Margaret Beaufort, who is Henry VII's of England's mama. So Margaret Beaufort's Henry VIII's grandma. She was married at 13 and her husband did not wait and they consummated it and she was pregnant at 13. To be fair to everybody around her, this was news and everybody talked about it and were appalled that he did not wait. So again, at the time, even if you got married young, you were supposed to be married and then wait for consummation. But
it wasn't a norm.
No, it wasn't just out of kindness of their heart. They knew because, like Margaret Beaufort, she had Henry VII and she never had another kid. They knew that that would be difficult. If you did have a kid and carried it to term, you'd probably either die or not be able to have kids again.
Right. Yeah. Like a 11, 12, 13-year-old body just doesn't.
Yeah.
Able to get pregnant doesn't mean it's going to be healthy. It is interesting, though, that kind of collision of the egalitarian education and then you're getting married at 10.
Yeah, this is where the female-male differences come on in. She's 10, he's 30, but in January of 1473, she's child bride, she gets married. Like I said, there are some stories that it is hard because some people say, yes, they did consummate it. Other people say they did wait till 14, but we do get a note from who else but the Duke. He says, quote, about his son-in-law, Girolamo, he slept with his wife another time and is very happy and content.
Oh,
that's daddy.
Don't talk about your daughter that way.
I know. It's very upsetting. As part of the marriage deal, so Girolamo, he acquires the city of Imola from Milan. It's again another little city outside of that Milan has control of. So now Caterina's husband would be a count and Caterina is his countess. And then they'd also get Forli, which is another city. Again, these are all those cities that are kind of up for grabs. They're under Milan's control. That's the reason for the marriage is the Pope wanted it. So now the Pope has it because his nephew is the count. What's good for her is Caterina, she doesn't immediately shack up with the new husband. She continues to live in Milan until she turns 14. And they did.
Great. So she gets to stay with daddy.
Yeah. And the book says that, I mean, at least we don't have any letters from husband and wife from the wedding ceremony to the time that she would go to live with her husband in Rome in 1476. So, which isn't super surprising because I'm like, what do a 30-year-old and a 10-year-old have to write each other about?
Yeah. Nothing. The answer, nothing.
While she's growing up in Milan, can you guess what her husband is up to in Rome?
Probably sleeping with Italian women. Oh, I know you Italian men. Not you of the current
Yeah.
time, but you historical
Yes.
Italian.
He even has an illegitimate son at this time. So he's shacking up with mistress after mistress. He's not exactly sad that his 10-year-old bride's not there.
To be fair, I'd prefer that. That's fine. Have non-child affairs. Leave Caterina alone.
I feel like it was required for this man, that class and age, to have like at least one mistress. I have a quote from Caterina's father, the Duke. He did admit that, know thyself. He admitted that lust was his greatest sin and quote, I have employed it in all the fashions and forms that one can do. And my notes just said, we get it, you like to fuck.
Yeah. I also want to be like, how many
Fashions and forms?
of
I don't know.
like, elaborate.
Maybe back in the day where there were other fashions and forms. Well, let's get to know Caterina's now husband. I call him a Pope Nepo baby because all that he has is through his uncle, who is the current Pope, Pope Sixtus IV. I'm just going to call him Pope Sixtus from here on out. Obviously, while the Pope's alive, husbands, he's reaping all the rewards, him and like all that family.
Sure.
But of course, there's always that hovering question on what would happen once the Pope inevitably died and another one took over. Because, unlike if you're a Medici, your son, your brother, somebody in the family's taking over. Obviously, the Pope, this is not hereditary.
Right. So the fame runs out, baby.
Exactly.
And then the money train.
And that question's always going to be lurking in the background. So think of that as we continue to talk through this stuff. But that's a future Girolamo problem. And right now, he's getting while the getting's good. He's getting everything his simple little heart desired. But Caterina would soon find out that her husband's kind of a dud. From the book again, his detractors saw him as fat with a heavy peasant-like appearance, pale skin.
Hey, be nice to
Pale
peasants.
skin and a sickly disposition, neither inherently bright nor well-read. Girolamo clearly owned his title and position to his illustrious uncle. I'm not usually one for shaming. I'm not usually one for shaming a person's appearance, but this is a man who wanted to consummate a marriage with a 10-year-old girl, so gloves are off. He's peasant-like.
Right. But I think that's being unkind to peasants. I'm like, hey, I have pale skin. Like, that part could be like me. Look like I've never seen the sun.
Apparently, he was not much to look at or anything. It's not like there was a redeeming. Yeah, there wasn't anything underneath that peasant-like exterior.
He also went through like John Lennon, a fat Elvis phase.
His whole phase was fat Elvis. He proves to make stupid decision after stupid decision.
They also like young girls.
Sure. Don't love it. He also forgets the most important part of being a leader, that you have to be seen. So he becomes the Count of Mola, but he's nowhere to be found. You can imagine the people of the city were very thrilled with their absentee town.
I loved it. Hey, I even know the school leadership when we went to our trip. The principals at the school, the charter school, said their number one leadership thing is be visible.
No. He was like, I will take that city, thank you, but I will continue to live in Rome.
But I will not visit it.
Before Caterina left for her marital home at 14, her family life in Milan would be shattered by an act of violence. So now we're going to thinking of violence as commonplace in medieval, early modern, Renaissance period, but no place lived up to the reputation like the Italian city-state. Street violence, assassinations, all kinds of political violence. They grew like grapes there. So to be a ruler must have been a terrifying prospect, because no matter how many bodyguards you had, there was always a chance that you would get assassinated.
This reminds me of late 1800s early 1900s Russia.
Yeah, it is a little bit like that. And I really want to, for people who are still wanting to get an idea, think of Romeo and Juliet with the family conflicts, bloodshed in the streets in Verona. That's kind of giving you an idea of what to expect. Not that political assassinations were unknown in other places, but compared to what we've talked about, England and stuff, this is a whole other ballgame.
Two households, both alike.
I can do this all. Thrown aware that learning layer scene from ancient grudge break to new mutiny. Civil blood makes civil hands unclean. From forth the fatal lines of these two foes.
These two fellows.
Pair of star-crossed lovers take their life. Okay, I'm not going
to. Wow, we are nerdy.
But anyway, I already mentioned that Galeazzo, the Duke of Milan and Caterina's father, did not have the best of reputation. And unfortunately, this happens over the years. It's not just his payoffs to the families of the women he slept with, although that didn't help. To quote the book, as the Duke's behavior became increasingly despotic and depraved, dissatisfaction mounted in the public square and hostility grew abroad. So the end of 1476 brings new plots to kill the hated Duke of Milan. We are on November 26th. It's a very cold and snowy Milan day. The Duke's going out to Mass to mark the feast of St. Stephen. Normally, he actually wears a breastplate as protection against assassination plots. I told you, this is the way of life. But today, the Duke refuses because, another quote from the book, fearing that the metal would ruin the line of his new ermine-trimmed silk robes.
I was just about to say, but it had something to do with a fashion choice.
I'm just imagining December 26th that he got this new silk robe as a Christmas gift and he wants to shout up, wear it immediately.
I and I don't want these lines from this breastplate.
This is the most relatable thing about him is the fact that he got new clothes for Christmas and he wants to show it off immediately. So I can't blame him there, but he's probably going to regret that.
Yeah. I'm guessing since you're bringing it up.
So he says goodbye to the kids, and then he's off to church to go to Mass. Normally, the Duke's out and about. He usually gets people petition him in the streets or in church to help on certain things, whether you're Duke or King. This is normal. So on this day, when a man approaches him, the Duke thinks nothing of it. The motion of the hand by the approaching man, however, was a signal to others who had gathered to kill the man who they thought was destroying Milan. So he's only 32 years old, and the Duke of Milan, he is stabbed to death in the church.
By one guy?
No, multiple.
Yeah, as I was about to say. So it was like
it was a signal. This is kind of like, you think Julius Caesar. The assassins didn't live too much longer afterwards, as the people of Milan were not thrilled. The assassins thought that they would be cheered as saviors of Milan. And this is really similar to post-Julius Caesar's assassination, where the assassins are like, you guys aren't happy about it? Well, no. The Milanese killed the assassins. With Caterina's father dead, the new Duke was her 6-year-old brother with Caterina's beloved stepmother, Bana, as regent. So it's like a big moment in her life, and one that she probably would never forget. It feels really similar to, in terms of what we know, that maybe Princess Elizabeth, aka future Queen Elizabeth, that she sees lessons in Catherine Parr becoming regent when Henry VIII is away in France. So we believe Caterina took inspiration from this moment.
Yeah.
But right after this moment is when Caterina's finally sent to join her husband. The thought is that they were still worried about continued violence in the city, so they sent her away.
Yeah. To fat little peasant man. Peasant looking. Sorry, peasant.
Regardless of how homesick Caterina was, and we know she was homesick because she's 14 and she writes to her sister and her stepmother about it. Caterina would play her role as countess to perfection, chef's kiss. She's 14 years old. She's grown into a really exceptionally beautiful woman. She's slim, elegant, impeccably dressed. Like I said, she fits the beauty standards of the day and pretty much any day. So I will post some of the pictures of her, ones we think are based off of her, because some of Botticelli's work, we're not 100% sure they're Caterina, but she certainly could be a Botticelli muse if that tells you. I'm sending you this article and you can scroll through some of the pictures. Like the first one, she's fair haired. She's gorgeous. You can see some of the pictures.
Oh, yeah. She's got a nice profile. I like the nice cheekbone. The other one, the one with Creek baby Jesus, isn't as flattering. Or the one above, the one that you posted with the violence.
She looks great in that. I mean, the rest of it's violent, but she looks amazing.
And that picture
with the head thing.
We're looking at different ones.
The portrait.
She doesn't look very good.
Looks fine.
Her niece, though, is gorge.
I know that profile,
but definitely looks like Botticelli.
She was known for being gorgeous and obviously being beautiful as part of the gig and wearing nice things, showing off the wealth and prestige of wherever you're ruling. She's welcomed into her city, Imola, with great pomp and even greater cheers from the locals. So there's banquets, meeting of noble men and women who comprise the court there. The only problem is when she gets there, her husband nowhere to be found. So not a great start to the marriage.
I thought you would probably be here when I showed up finally.
The thing is also she hadn't even heard from him. She's just waiting and partying. So they're partying, lots of very late nights, music, good company. She's waiting out for days and she's like, okay, I'm going to keep partying. We said he already didn't quite make himself popular with the populace by not taking time out of his time with mistresses and whatever debauchery he's up to go there. So she's just waiting for news from him. It actually does turn out that there was an assassination attempt made on him. His uncle, the Pope, Uncle Pope, he's keeping him under lock and key for now. But he didn't send word or anything. Uncle Pope tries to keep Caterina from coming to Rome, saying there's suspicion of plague, which I'm sure there was because 15th century. I'm like, no, you just stay there, just hang out. But she doesn't get she doesn't get the letter. She just immediately goes to Rome. She's like, I'm tired of waiting out here. Well, if she was hoping that her husband would be a better match for her now at 14, not great luck. Here's another catty remark from the book. Girolamo, now 34, was aging fast. Ill health, indulgent lifestyle, and several sleepless nights due to conspiracies against his life made the Count seem more sallow. So he lived in that rock star lifestyle.
I guess. Bloating him up.
There you go, Fat Elvis.
There's the Fat Elvis. There you go.
Well, back to Caterina. The husband and wife, their first night of the reunion is Girolamo. He doesn't even stay with his wife. Uncle Pope's orders. At least he has the decency to give Caterina a beautiful pearl necklace, which is not an innuendo. And if you don't know what the innuendo is, don't look it up. I'm talking to you, Mom. Later, they do have a second sort of wedding ceremony, this time blessed by Uncle Pope. It's topped off with a huge over-the-top reception. Even for Caterina, who's been raised in luxury, as we said, in the Ducal Palace of Milan, Rome's a whole new ball game. There might be a subset of you guys who are like, well, this Pope's you think very pious. No, they're not playing around at this time. They lived and partied like kings. Many of them had mistresses and their own brood of illegitimate children. Caterina's partying hard too. It was late nights, which means late morning. She's staying up late, getting up late. It's party after party.
Lucky.
Yeah. It really reminds me of parties at Versailles with Marie Antoinette.
Just sounds like.
Here's another quote from the book. These Renaissance galas entertain the noblest families, greatest thinkers, richest bankers, and loveliest women. Caterina, the crown princess, played her part to the full. Roman diarists waxed eloquent about her fair tresses and gushed over her dresses, which, unlike the high-necked Roman style, displayed a daring décolletage. So, ooh la la. She's quite literally the belle of the ball of each ball. But I also don't want to make it sound like she's completely self-involved. Even as a teenager, she's like 14 at the time, and she's like actually doing the work of governing. I can imagine she's doing more of it than her husband, but she is getting letters for intercessions and people are asking her for appointments. She's still going through and doing what she needs to do. But I do want to talk a little bit about life in Rome, because life in Rome's a contrast to these busy months of jewels and banquets. There's about 60,000 people who are living in Rome. And if you're not the Pope or related to the Pope, the city is very crowded and dirty. Uncle Pope's going to do his best and do some building projects, but it's still a far cry from we've talked about Rome and height and glory. At this time, it's kind of a little bit dirty, really crowded, violent. So speaking of violence, when outside the walls of a palace, Caterina and her husband and entourage, they always have to go around with essentially an army of bodyguards. We had already talked about Girolamo, or at least one attempt on his life, probably fairly, which, just kidding. I don't condone political violence, but I mean,
not the most surprising for the time that he would be a target.
And it's not just them. I do want to say in terms of bodyguards, this is commonplace for anyone who has money who lives there. Here's another quote from the book. All the important families in Rome employed them, which is like these armies of bodyguards, mostly out of necessity. For example, the death of a pope, whether sudden or expected, would unleash anarchy. Mobs attacked the houses of the wealthy and crime infested the cities. So not a great place to live once you get outside of the walls of the palace. And if you think Girolamo had a change of heart after his own assassination attempt, you would be wrong, because as Caterina's adapting to Roman life, her husband's plotting. He's going to become part of the infamous Pazzi conspiracy in 1478. Have you heard of Pazzi conspiracy? Just the name.
The name sounds familiar.
Yeah, people might know the name, if not what it is pretty well known. To set the scene, the relationship between the papacy, so Uncle Pope, relationship between him and the city of Florence, it's become tense. So at the top, I talked about how Florence at this time is being ruled by the Medici family, which a lot of people will know. The Medici, they were bankers of Florence. And now they've been ruling Florence for a while now, and they'll later become dukes of Tuscany. The family, like many in Italy, they're putting family members in high places in the church, and eventually some would become pope as well. Right now, the head of their family is Lorenzo Medici, who I've already talked about. He's often called Lorenzo the Magnificent. He's a patron of Italian Renaissance artists like Botticelli, Michelangelo. So when you think of Florence, Florence is known for its art scene, and all that was fostered under Lorenzo. And then he also has a 24-year-old brother who's the hot one. He's the attractive and charismatic brother, Giuliano. He's the sexy one. We've got like the intellectual one and the sexy one. There's a dispute between Uncle Pope Sixtus and the Medici. It's about a loan, and this other banker family, the Pazzi family. They're like the Medici, where they're a banking family. They become involved. You don't really need to know the details. You just need to know that we have these two major banking families fighting, and the Pope's in it too. And basically, the Pope and the Pazzi, they want to make the Medici pay. They want them out. They feel like the Medicis are getting a little bit too big for their britches, and they want somebody in Florence who's going to play nice. And of course, Caterina's husband's part of the Pazzi conspiracy. So the conspiracy itself is to kill both Lorenzo and Giuliano, the head of the family.
Even the hot
one. They're like, we can't just take out the brainy one. We need the hot one too. I think the aim was eventually to put the Pazzis in as rulers of Florence. And the Pope's there because he hopes that the Pazzis will be more pliable. Again, there's some tension with the Medicis. The Medici are very powerful at this time. We might be asking, where is this assassination planning to take place? It's going to be inside the Cathedral Santa Maria de Fiore in Florence, which you would know for its dome. If you think of Florence, you know that's what you know. Yes, they're going to assassinate the Medicis inside a church. That is their plan.
Well, and both
Yep.
sons.
And I know you do have in an earlier century Thomas Becket getting martyred in Canterbury Cathedral, but this is still pretty shocking in an age where religion ruled people's lives to do an assassination in a church. These are and were holy places, but these conspirators had to work with what they had. But I will say, if you're trying to win people to your cause, don't assassinate people in churches. I didn't think I had to tell people that you shouldn't assassinate people in churches, but apparently I do. But it also just goes to show what kind of boneheads the assassins are. We already know Caterina's husband's not the brightest. So,
yeah, you're not going to really get people on your cause. You kill the hot one in the church.
They're not going to like it. They have a date set to assassinate them, but Giuliano, the hot one, he's sick. Mm-hmm. So he keeps not showing up. So like, God damn it.
Sure, he's sick. He doesn't want to go to church.
They have it planned where one of the assassins, he's a well-known individual. I don't want to get into his story, but he's in town and the Medici are supposed to accompany him to church. So eventually the assassins basically dragged sick Giuliano to church. They literally put one arm under the other. Let's do it. You've got to come because we're running out of time.
Doesn't seem suspicious at all. No, you really got to go to church today.
And at this time, Caterina's husband, Girolamo, he's on the march with his army to Florence. He's going to settle any unrest once the actual murders take place. Fingers crossed. In the church, when the elevation of the host happens during Mass, that is actually the signal to strike. So the assassin, this is really sacrilegious. They strike Giuliano, the hot one, on the top of his head. They kill him. But actually, Lorenzo, the Magnificent, he escapes. His people, they drag him out of the church and he doesn't get killed. The Florentines are not happy again, and they take great pleasure in capturing the killers. This is to quote the book. Sure. The archbishop and the killers were apprehended and executed almost immediately. The Florentines hung the corpses above public squares. I've been there. I've been to Florence. There's a main square in the main city hall, and that's where a replica of the David statue.
Bodies are still there.
The David statue's outside there, and they hung them from outside those windows. Caterina's husband is not there in Florence, so he escapes any sort of justice from his part in the Pazzi conspiracy. But make no mistake, it was a huge disgrace. It becomes public knowledge. People know. The Pope is pissed with his nephew.
Oh, I'm sure.
He's not happy. He doesn't like the Medicis, but the fact that you're in this failed. I mean, they did kill Giuliano, but Lorenzo's still alive, so not great. To quote the book again, the people of Rome viewed Girolamo with a mixture of repulsion and ridicule. At 16 years old, Caterina found herself bound to an inept murderer and the butt of Roman humor. She never complained, but something had changed for Caterina. This would be the last time she passively stood by to watch events that so deeply affected her. Really humiliating for her, and unfortunately would be not the last time that Caterina's husband would be a dope.
Do better.
It's a humiliating time for her, but there's a bright spot. Her first kid arrives in August 31st, 1479. It's a son. And it's named after Augustus, who we talked about in our episode on Claudius. So it's Augustus's given name, Ottaviano.
How old is she?
I'm going to do the math right. She's born in 1463. So 16. So finally, she's pregnant. She has a kid and she has a boy, which we all know is the goal. As a wife, her duty's not done, but bearing a son is the first step to be a good wife.
Check that off, yeah.
Her first son's godfather was none other than Cardinal Rodrigo Borgia, a.k.a. our future Borgia Pope. He's rising through the ranks of the church. He's an up-and-coming star at this time. At this point, he's using his newfound wealth to build a glorious palace, which the book compares to the Domus Aurea, which was Emperor Nero's golden house. So it's a very beautiful, shiny house. It's generally not a good thing, though, compared to anything Nero related. In addition to this palace, Cardinal Borgia was also already a father to at least 6 kids, including the infamous Cesare Borgia, who will be making his appearance next episode. So we will not see Cesare this episode, but we will next. And yes, I am picturing Jeremy Irons, who plays Rodrigo in The Borgias on Showtime. So just deal with it. Fun fact, I have an iPad and its name is Jeremy Irons because I love Jeremy Irons.
Just like she named her firstborn after Augustus.
I named my iPad after. It's the same.
Same sort of deal.
Well, Caterina had barely enough time to finish the celebrations of her birth of her son when 3 months after the birth, she's pregnant again.
No, I was about to say, don't tell me. No. Get away. Let her heal.
He does not. And this child is another son. So she has 2 sons. And the son's also a son named Cesare. Their next child would be a girl, though. If you want to like Girolamo, he does say when she gives birth to the girl, Bianca, that he's, quote, more pleased with a girl than a boy, which is easier to say when you have 2 sons in a nursery, but thanks for not being a joke.
I think it would be a little bit different.
We'll give him credit for not being the worst for once in his life. They're eventually going to have 6 kids, 5 sons, 1 daughter. But that's just with her first husband. So, spoiler, she's going to have more kids, more husbands,
more babies.
Well, we did talk about her sexual appetites.
Well, sexual appetite versus having babies.
Not in Renaissance Italy. We were in a world without birth control, babe. Well, Caterina's sidelined by these pregnancies, but her husband's becoming increasingly erratic, and he's also unwilling to let Caterina out of his sights at this time. She wants to go visit Milan to see her family. Her husband says no. While he had never been a good husband and a good man in general, understatement of the year, his paranoia seems to be growing day by day.
Is that an STD?
It's hard to know. He's count, but he's actually spending so much time indoors that there are rumors. The people of the city are like, what's going on? Because they see her. So she is out. She's among the people. She's distributing alms. She's helping the poor. She's the visible one. So yeah, there are rumors. They're like, is something wrong with him? I don't quite know.
That was just the erratic nature. And if he was just sleeping around, I was curious.
I'm sure he had at least one STD. Not that it mentioned, but let's be honest. There's probably at least one. Caterina, she's like a consummate politician. Being among the people, being among the poor. So they love her. They're suspicious of him. And when he does get off his ass, only disgrace and disappointment follows. There's a lot of skirmishes and battles of this time because he's the captain of the papal army. Again, nepotism.
Yeah.
But Caterina's husband finds every opportunity not to fight. And the book says it best by saying, Caterina, whose father, grandfather, and great-grandfather had won their fame and their lands through boldness in battle, must have found the conduct of her husband disgraceful. The Sforza name had never been associated with cowardice. By Christmas 1482, Caterina realized that, despite her husband's high position and ornamentally trimmed garments, nothing of substance existed within. Bam.
Whoa. Yeah,
but true. That's true. That's the hard thing for her. She does have substance. We're not going to get to too much today, but she knows how to rule and he does not. And he's not the kind of man who is willing to consult with, consult with his wife. It's not like he's going to take her advice.
Yeah.
But unfortunately for Caterina and her husband, their great protector, the man who held all their fortunes in his holy hands. Well,
not Uncle
Pope
Popey.
Sixtus, he's dying as the summer rolled around in 1484. They had always known that when the Pope died, all hell would break loose. And this moment has arrived. So on August 12th, 1484, Pope Sixtus breathed his last. And as always, it would be 21-year-old Caterina who would step up, not her husband, to make sure they kept what was theirs. We're going to stop there in the second part. There's going to be multiple assassinations. We have not hit our last assassinations by far. There's going to be our Cesare Borgia appearance, and of course, the event that will give her the nickname, the Tigress of Forli.
And I want to know more how first husband dies. Maybe in an assassination.
I don't want to say spoiler, but yeah. Did we think there was any other way that he was going to go out? No.
Yeah. Seemed a little too planned there.
He's on his way.
With that doughy peasant-y face.
They're ready for change. And this is a pretty good introduction to Caterina. She seems pretty great based on here, but I will say, hold your applause. We're going to get to some unsavory parts of her reputation in our next episode.
Well, she hasn't had to face too much crisis besides her dad dying.
We already spoiled it that her husband's going to die, and you're thinking about where that leads a young woman with a lot of children who are minors. That's usually not a good thing.
I didn't know she existed in this universe though. Obviously, I'm familiar with the Borgias and the Medicis, but I didn't know of her existence.
Yeah.
Till
we need to get you to Florence. She's from Milan, but I think
we can go to Milan and Florence if listeners want to go on, buy me coffee, or buy me a plane ticket. I'll take a trip to Florence just to verify.
I'm pretty sure I've seen the Sforzas, because there are Sforzas who are like anything that they're ones that become pope. So you can see them everywhere. They're all over the Italian peninsula. I'm excited for part 2 because it's going to get real bloody. It's going to get really interesting.
It's going to be hard for me not to look things up, but I'm not going to.
Don't do it.
I'm going to let it be. No, I won't. I'll let it be a surprise. Before we go, just a reminder about the Patreon. Remember, for the month of October, free, but you have to join to get those posts unlocked. We have those mini episodes. I actually have a poll going on right now that'll end, I don't know, sometime the end of this week. So probably like the 18th or 19th for who I will do as my next figure. And if you want to have a vote in that, you can join. But you have to join as a free member. I'm trying to think of anything else. Anything else?
No, just also stick around. We've got the trailer for Doorkey, so stick around for that as well.
Yep, and then we will see you here to conclude. I'm not going to even attempt.
Caterina Sforza.
Caterina Sforza. Sforza. My mouth's like, you are not Italian.
Hey, I did Gagliazzo.
I know. I don't pick people. I pick John Lennon.
I'm probably not perfect, but I did my best.
Yeah, you're perfect in my eyes. It's beautiful. Beautiful Italian.
Buongiorno. Yeah.
There we go. There we go.
Wait.
Yeah. Sorry, listeners. We just discovered
Does mine doing that?
Since this is not a visual medium podcast, listeners, I made a heart sign with my hand on we're doing this through Descript. It's called like Squadcast or something where we're recording it. I'm doing the heart sign and it's making hearts and Aaron's. It's not.
Normally by hearts.
Actually, I want to take a picture of this.
Is it because I talk too much about assassinations? Is it because I made the pearl necklace joke?
It's like Aaron's aren't legit. See, I can send out real love.
Look, I'm doing it.
But are you? Make it more heart-like. Be more centered. Be more centered in the frame. Push it towards the camera. Or push it towards yourself.
You don't have to do anything. It's like you're a Disney fucking princess. You're Giuliano. You're the hot one.
It's your doughy peasant.
No.
The camera loves me. It's like, oh, you want to do something cute?
I'm so desperate and I'm not doing anything.
I mean, no, that's why it doesn't like you. Don't the desperate nature.
Fine, I've given up.
Look how dumb you look.
I'm giving up. You even have to do it. You put your hand there and it just sends out heart.
We really feel the love. Think of something in your heart that
Assassinations.
you love. No, what am I gonna do it?
No, you're Giuliano and I'm just Lorenzo. But to be fair, Giuliano got assassinated and Lorenzo lived on. So
Perfect.
I'll take it.
Perfect. Well, listeners will post this great finding on
Jamie
on our
took some
Instagram.
pictures.
God, yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
well, stay tuned for next time for part 2 to finish up Caterina Sforza's story. And we'll see if, I've been able to make the heart work.
There, you can do it, champ.
I'm just going to have to find more love in my heart next time.
I think you can. You'll figure it out. I have faith in you, champ.
Well, should we sign off? Bye.
Bye.
Hello, my name is April, and I'm the host of the history podcast, Doorkey. Doorkey is 2 words, door and key. It's a play on the word dorky, which is really fitting because I'm a dork who loves to talk about history and random events and people from history. So come join me as I dive into these events and people. From Ötzi the Iceman to Studio 54, I cover it all in a way that's easy to consume. Get ready to hear a new and different perspective and gain a deeper understanding of the past while having some fun along the way. Welcome to Doorkey. You can find and subscribe to Doorkey anywhere you listen to podcasts, and Doorkey is on all social medias as Doorkey Pod, so be sure to check all of that out as well. Talk to you soon, friends.